Welcome to the Writing Gym Podcast. We're here to pump up your writing. And now your host, Andi Brixey, personal trainer at the Writing Gym.
Hey there, writers and newsdaters. Do you have dreams of finishing your book but have no idea what you would do afterward? Do you have a finished book and you aren't sure how to sell it? Do you have questions about how to price your book or how to adapt to the changing publishing industry? Well, we're going to answer those questions and more in this episode with Amy Collins of New Shelves Books.
And now I'd like to introduce our resident writing coach, the gal who helps you pump your writing into publishable shape in the Writing Gym. Welcome back to the Writing Gym Podcast, Annalisa Parent.
Thanks so much for having me, Andi. It's a pleasure to be here again.
And now to introduce our fabulous guest. Amy Collins is the president of New Shelves Books, one of the best-known book sales and marketing agencies in the U.S. In the last 20 years, Amy and her team have sold over 40 million books into the bookstore, library, and chain store market for small and mid-sized publishers. For a free ebook copy of her book, The Right Way, we will put a note in the show notes for you, so make sure and check that out. So let's just get right into the question portion, Amy. How did you get into publishing?
I was an English major, like you are when you don't know what you want to do for a living. And someone suggested that I be a teacher. Well, that sounded great. Great. Summer's off. Probably not the most altruistic reason to be a teacher, but so I tried it. Small problem. Apparently, I don't like children. So being a teacher did not go well. I mean, I did okay for a year. No small children were harmed in the making of this story, but at the end of the year, I was done. So here I am with 2 degrees, 2 of the most useless degrees on the planet, classical music and English literature. And I got a job at a bookstore just to make ends meet until I could figure out what I wanted to do for a living. Well, the universe thought that was hysterical. And a few months later, they asked me to be a book buyer. And for the next 5 years, I climbed the corporate ladder and I became the book buyer for a chain of bookstores in upstate New York. And I did that for 5 years. And then I was offered a job as a sales rep with a publishing company and moved to Philadelphia and started working for Prima Publishing, which eventually was a division of Random House. And just my career took off from there. But it all started with not knowing what I wanted to do for a living and getting a part-time job at a bookstore. And here I am, I hate to say it, but almost 30 years later, I've had the most amazing career. I love what I do for a living. I get up every morning enjoying, publishing and books, and I'm the luckiest woman on the planet. And it all started with not knowing what I wanted to do.
That's wonderful. And I think that that's really inspirational to many of our listeners who probably find themselves in the same boat, not knowing, what am I going to do? And many of the authors who come to us are looking for a second career as a writer. We talk about living the author lifestyle and really whatever that means for the individual. For some people, it means, that secluded cabin where they can write and write and write. For others, it means being in the spotlight and having that kind of celebrity and being known for whatever kind of stories they want to tell, but that there is this possibility within the realm of storytelling for people to have that second career or third career and really get out there, and you're living proof of that, Amy.
Yeah. I've said for years, the reason why I get to work in publishing is because I say yes to everything that comes down the pike. And the same is true for the writers I work with. If somebody asks if you want to go to a session or if you want to go to a workshop, you say yes. If someone asks if you want to join a writing group or an editorial critique group, don't say no to anything. You have no idea who you might meet. Annalisa, that's how you and I met. I was sitting in Nashville at a conference I had no intention of going to. And, you sat down at the table. I sat down at your table, I think. And, you just stay open to everything. You have no idea where the universe might take you.
Yeah, well, and it took us out to dinner on a rooftop in Nashville. There you go.
That's a mellow mushroom. I do remember. Yeah.
Great. So talk to us a little bit about what you've observed, Amy, in the publishing industry in the last 10 years. What kind of changes have you seen? And then what kind of changes can you predict, and as much as any of us can, about where we're headed in the next 2 to 5 years?
Well, there are parts of our industry that do not exist anymore and will never come back. The people whose job it was to press the paper from calf skin into, that doesn't exist anymore. There's not a lot of call for people who roll the scrolls anymore. And if you'd asked me 10 years ago, one of the biggest things I've learned about the changes in the industry is don't declare something is dead too soon, though. I am willing to go out on a limb and say that scroll rolling is over. But I also went out on a limb 10 years ago and I thought that hardcovers were over, and they're not. I, 10 years ago, thought libraries were dying. Guess what? They're coming back with a vengeance. Mm-hmm. There are 900 more independent bookstores in the United States right now than there was 6 years ago. Everything that I thought was moving away from the center is coming back. Now, in addition, the same is true for Amazon. The same is true, right now everyone is talking about that maybe Barnes and Noble will go away, the demise of the bookstore chain. Well, they all said libraries were dying and they all said independent bookstores were dying. So here's the thing, guys. I have seen huge changes in the last 10 years. I have seen a consolidation of book sales and distribution in a way that we couldn't even have imagined. But in the next 10 years, will it consolidate down even more? Will it broaden out dramatically? Will people start reading books on the inside of their eyelids from implants that we got from our benevolent overlords? I'm not sure, but I do know that I don't trust anyone who says they know what's going to happen next, because if I've learned anything in the last 10 years, is that you can't underestimate what readers want. And it's far more important to reflect and to observe what readers are looking for than to try and guess what they're going to be looking for.
Right. What excites you about where you see publishing going right now?
Okay, what excites me the most about publishing is the part that drives most traditional writers crazy. But writing and stories and books and content and advice is everywhere outside of books too. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love that the publishing industry is not just 204 pages sandwiched between 12-point cardboard that was printed with 4-color glossy or matte cover. I love that there are apps where 17-year-old girls are getting one chapter at a time of fantastic stories pushed onto their cell phone every day. That's the Hooked app, by the way. I'm absolutely obsessed with what's happening with audiobooks, nonfiction in particular. People are loving audiobooks. Now, podcasts had a lot to do with that. Podcasts such as this one. People are used to listening. Mm-hmm. For those who say that radio is dying, okay, it was. It's not anymore. Mm-hmm. Everything is coming around again. And so what I love and what excites me the most about our industry is that stories and advice and truly beautiful writing, poetry can thank itself, can thank Instagram for its new lease on life. Everything is showing up everywhere. And I think that's amazing. Now, the downside to that, and something I'm not excited about, is that there is, at the moment, a very large misconception that truly great writing, advice, content, and stories should be free or extremely low cost. Right. I pay $7.99 a month for Netflix, and I should be able to watch whatever the heck I want, and I'm ticked off when a show that I love is no longer on Netflix. I think they owe it to me. And now I'm even more ticked off because they're raising the price to, I think, $12.99. The same is true for books. With romance novelists, one of the things that we're seeing on Amazon is it's very, very hard to promote and advertise romance in particular because there's so much free and 99-cent content. There's so much out there. I don't think this is how it's going to be forever, but at the moment, the Walmarting of America, and I'm only speaking about the U.S. market at the moment. I'm certainly not an expert if you're listening from France. I'm not talking about you guys, but bonjour.
Bonjour.
But the US market the Walmarting of the U.S. market is we have learned to want to pay as little as possible for the most as possible. And art and beautiful writing has become, in some cases, devalued from people's expectations that they should be able to get it for free or very low cost.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And one of the tragedies that I see, Amy, and I don't know if you see this, is that authors are some of the worst offenders, right? They say, oh, I don't want to pay that much for that book. That's ridiculous, right? Without thinking that, gosh, I could be that author someday having my book out into the marketplace. And so as authors, we absolutely have to support each other. As artists, we absolutely need to support each other and honor that creative process. And we all know as writers how long it takes to create a book, a short story, a poem, the amount of revision that goes into a quality product. These are not things that normally happen. I mean, maybe once in your lifetime you wake up at 2 a.m. with the brilliance that doesn't need any revision. If that happens to you, let me know. But it's not something that's going to happen for the average artist of any type, including writers. And so in order to respect the creative process that it takes, we can support one another and, don't just buy local, but buy each other's books at full price and support one another.
And as you're setting your prices, for those of you who decide that you're going to start your own publishing enterprises and set your own prices, on the other hand, make sure you keep in mind what the marketplace is asking for. If you have a 108-page novella, please do not, as a paperback, please don't try and charge me $23.99 for it. Yes, I'm sure your writing is brilliant, but so there's a balance in all things. Mm-hmm. No, I shouldn't get your book for 99 cents, but no, you shouldn't be asking for $25 because you're brilliant. Somewhere in the middle. And if you don't know where that middle is, then that's why you either hire someone like me or Annalisa, or you do your research. There's market research is not, it's not brain surgery. It really is possible to do it on your own. And but there's so much that goes into properly valuing a book. And unfortunately, just like I wouldn't ask an author to design a cover, I wouldn't ask an author to set their own price. They're probably not the best choice for that.
Right. And you and I speak on a regular basis. We do a lot of projects together, you and I, and so that's really an exciting part of our work together. But one of the things that we were talking about was exactly that, right? Hiring the right person for the right job, kind of not taking it all onto your own shoulders. And we see, both of us in different ways, a lot of authors doing that. And the end result is that each of us have conversations with would-be successful authors who say, well, I wrote a book and I did X with it and it's just not selling. How come?
So because the cover has Comic Sans on it, but yes. Because papyrus is not a font. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And so these are people, and I'm sure you say this across your platform. I say this across my platform, hire the expert that you need for the job. And so many of these would-be successful authors get lost in the mire of doing it yourself and not doing it very well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know what a sore tooth feels like. I can diagnose a cracked tooth. I shouldn't be the one to fix it. Yeah. I know exactly, and it's the same thing that for writers that I talk about, whether it's writing your back cover copy or doing your marketing or designing your cover or anything like that. I know a number of painters. Now, when I say that, I know some people who I would hire to paint my house. They would paint my walls beautifully. I know other people who do watercolors, and if I want a picture of a crow on a background of wheat, they're the ones I'd go to. I know another group of people who would paint my car. They work and they do a great job doing body work on my car. I wouldn't ask a house painter to paint my car. I would certainly not ask a car painter to, paint me a portrait for over my couch. Just because you're a writer and creative doesn't mean you've got the skills, the expertise, and the training. There's no shame, guys, in not being able to do it all yourself. I've been in the industry since Jesus was in short pants, and I'm telling you, I don't design my own covers. I don't edit my own books. I don't write my own copy.
Right. And I'm so glad that you said that, because we're totally on the same page with that. And I think that you must have read last week's email, the newsletter that went out, because it was exactly that analogy about a dentist. You know, you're not going to go to your neighbor and say, could you fill this cavity for me? Like that would be folly. And yet writing, I think because writing is something that most of us, I hope, in school have done from a very young age. We think that we've got a certain area of expertise, and, you know, whatever, drawing a picture. We've been doing this in art class since elementary school. We think, oh gosh, I can design a cover. And you and I have both seen these nightmare horror stories of covers that just don't work. And, you know, it's simply because the artist isn't a cover designer. And notice that I said cover designer, not graphic designer, because some people go out and get a graphic designer who may or may not be qualified for that particular endeavor. Maybe they can make great logos, but they're not a cover designer. So,
or they're beautiful illustrators that do great artwork, but cover design is a completely different thing. And it's not just cover design, proofreading. You know, I know so many people who hire, you know, their next door neighbor or their librarian friend to proofread. Proofreaders are, and please forgive me for any of you professional proofreaders out there, because I'm about to get on your hate list. Proofreaders are a weird group of people. You people, you're like on the spectrum. There's some sort of bizarre, kind of compulsive, weird focus that you have to be a truly talented, successful proofreader. And I don't have that focus. Neither does your librarian friend. If your librarian friend was a good enough proofreader, she would not have the skills to work with the public. Proofreaders are not please, guys, please understand that there is a skill set and a personality set that comes with each of these jobs. And if you don't know what they are, there's no shame in that. But don't spend money until you've learned.
That's really good advice. I know that's going to be a meme that's going to go out, right? And you know, Andi and I have talked about this at length, you know, because one of the things that I talk about in storytelling for pantsers, and I'll just go briefly through this analogy, is that like throwing good money after good money after good money after good money over and over and over again. And I use this analogy of someone who wants to ride a bike, right? If I'd never ridden a bike and I've got my brand new bike, it's Christmas, great, I'm going to learn how to ride it. And I take this, $10 class and it teaches me the parts of a bicycle. And then I take a $50 class and it teaches me the physics of a bicycle. And then I take a $100 class and it teaches me the road rules. I still haven't learned how to ride that dang bike, but I've wasted all of this money doing this endeavor. And, it's ridiculous when we think about bike riding. Nobody would approach bike riding that way. That would be foolish. And yet so many writers approach the writing process, the publishing process, and the marketing and selling process in exactly that way, where they're going to spend a little bit on this little conference, and they're going to spend a little bit on this little workshop, and they're going to spend a little bit on this person who might be able to design a cover because they know an art teacher, like their great-grandmother was an art teacher. I mean, these stories, I'm sure that you hear them. And when I say them in this way, the ridiculousness of it comes out and shines through. And yet so many authors, sadly, are approaching the process in this way, throwing $50 after $100 after $1,000, and pretty soon we end up with these stories. And I'm sure you hear these too, Amy, but Andi and I hear this all the time. I spent $10,000 to get a book done, and I'm still not even finished writing it.
Yeah.
Where did all that money go? That was a waste. $50, $100 at a time over the course of 10 years. That's sad. It's truly very sad.
If you're going to spend that kind of money, you should have some killer shoes to show for it.
Yes, I think we have some pictures of me in some killer shoes. Do you have a killer shoes picture, Amy, that we can put on the show notes page?
I will have to figure that out. For those of you who like shoes, I will work that out. Yeah. Of course, most of my days I'm in Converse or Merrell's, but sure.
I have a question. It actually came from one of the writers in our group, Barbara Zito. Which social media platforms, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but which social media platforms do you find most successful for authors in promoting their books?
I am happy to answer that question with the understanding that I am not a social media expert. I actually have a woman who's in the next office over that I hire who does this for me. But my understanding is the following. If you, and most of the people listening right now are fiction authors.
Mhm.
So if you are gearing up and you are writing a book and you're going to be focusing on a very female-centric readership, if your readership is going to be skewing young, 30 and below, because keep in mind, 27-year-olds are reading there are more 27-year-olds buying books right now than 67-year-olds. I mean, I know we all love our own age group, but millennials, they've all got library cards, they're downloading books, they're reading like crazy. They're on Instagram. They're taking a look at Pinterest. You know, if you're 25 to 35, Pinterest, Instagram, that's the way to go. If you're writing for women of a certain age, as I like to refer to myself, I'm in my 50s, you want to focus on Facebook. Facebook is where a lot of us hang out. Now, there are no tried and true rules for this. If you are one of the few unfortunate nonfiction authors who have stumbled into this podcast, LinkedIn might be a better choice for you. Twitter would be a great choice. Twitter is actually one of my favorite places to get to know other authors. I love watching what fiction authors are doing on Twitter if they do it right. And there's no point, though, if you've written a World War II armistice novel, then that is, and your market is 63-year-old women who's remember their mothers telling the story of coming home from the war. Twitter's not the right game for you. But if you've written a steampunk, sci-fi, futuristic, post-utopian novel, Twitter's perfect for you. So I wish, Andi, I could answer that more specifically. But I'm hoping those examples will help your question asker.
No, I think that'll help a lot.
Sorry, Andi. What I love about your response, is that, as usual, Amy, you and I are playing the same tune. And that is that so many times all people are looking for a shortcut. And your answer indicates that there is no shortcut. What is the real answer? Well, a solid marketing strategy that takes into account who your audience is. That's the real answer.
And how do you learn who that audience is? I'll give you a very short version. You find out who the best-selling books and authors are that share your readership right now. You do not assume you know who they are. You go find out who they really are. And then you go to Goodreads and you go to Twitter and you go to Facebook and you see who's following them. You see what the fans are saying on their page. And then you click on those fans and you see how old they are. You find out what gender they are. What part of the country do they live in? Are they predominantly Christian? Are they predominantly pagan? It takes a lot of time. When I take on a new client and people are like, man, you charge a lot. And I'm like, I do a heck of a lot of work. It takes hours and hours and hours. And after you dial in your market, it changes after 2 months and you got to do it again. So, guys, don't just assume that you are your readership. In most cases, you're wrong.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good point. And also skews toward another thing that we're in agreement on, which is, not just not throwing away money, but choosing to invest wisely in the professionals who really can help you. And, we talk about cost versus investment, right? So investing in yourself and really making that happen for you so that you can live your author dream, whatever that may be.
Mm-hmm. So now we have the final question that we ask every lovely guest who comes on our podcast, which is, if you could give one piece of advice to aspiring authors, what would it be?
Man, you couldn't have warned me ahead of time that was the question. Okay.
More fun to do it on the fly. If you have time to prepare, it sounds rehearsed.
If I could give one bit of advice to any aspiring author, what would it be? I know what would be. Write, research, and reach out every day without fail. Do a little bit of writing every day. Do a little bit of research every day. And this is brand new advice for me, so I may coin this, so nobody trademark this. And research, reach out, and write every day. Do those three things. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time, just a few minutes a day. But if you can check those three things off, you're well on your way to becoming a successful author.
I love it.
I love that. That was a fantastic answer, Amy. Thank you so much.
If you like what you've heard and are interested to see if you're the right fit for the writing gym, here's what to do next. Head to www.datewiththemuse.com/publish now and book an appointment to speak with our team. Here's how it works. We'll get on the phone for about 45 minutes and we'll get crystal clear on 3 things. The best way for you to publish, the best way to achieve your publishing dream, and the exact strategy you should be using to reach your publishing goals. Remember, publishing a book well doesn't happen on its own. You need expert guidance to make it happen. We've helped writers all over the world to finish, publish, and sell their novels well, all while sharing their unique story and making the world a better place along the way. To see if we can help you to do the same, head to www.datewiththemuse.com/publish now. I'm Andi Brixey, personal trainer over in the Writing Gym, and we'll talk soon. Happy writing! And hey, since you listened all the way to the end of this episode, here's this week's special little quirk of the week. Kind of like a blooper reel, but not. And I don't want to be a rat, but this week it's very special because I have 2 little things to share. First of all, did you know that Amy Collins has degrees in classical music and English literature? And also, Annalisa and Amy share a very fond love for amazing shoes. We'll definitely be posting photos on the show notes. Thank you for listening.